This topic just refuses to go away. Anytime something involving it happens in the manga, there will be some sort of discourse, disagreements or divide that will follow pretty much instantaneously. And you know this is true because if you've read chapter 1118, you know exactly what I'm talking about. To start, my policy has always been that everyone has their own opinions and there's nothing wrong with that. They are allowed to dislike something and that's completely fine, and I still abide by that. But I do fall ridiculously heavily onto one side of this seesaw, and I am happy to say it's the positive side, although again, that's not to say the people on the other side are wrong. I have just been caught up in this wave and I am letting it take me out to the vast openness of possibilities in the ocean, because we now have someone else who is totally free, and that person is Sun God Bonney. And I'll be talking about why I'm a fan of it, of course. But let's firstly talk about Kuma, because he was never free, born straight into slavery, and after fighting harder than anyone, he actually ended up welcoming his own slavery, because throughout Kuma's life he was forced to learn, or even was tortured until he learned that freedom, seemingly something so simple but meaningful, was not a given. So when he was given the opportunity to bestow such a big gift as freedom to someone else, namely Bonney, he welcomed his own imprisonment with open arms. If you remember, during his backstory where Ginny and he were still kids in the church in the Sorbet Kingdom, sort of christened his hands with the name Hands of Liberation. And that sparked, albeit unserious, conversations about what if Kuma was Nika or had the Nika fruit and things of that sort. A topic that was obviously never going to come to pass in the manga, but there was still a discussion to be had because there had never been someone as endearing, brave, or any other positive superlative you can think of as Kuma. But really it boiled down to the fact that Nika is the freest person there is, but Kuma, no matter how selfless, actively chained his own freedom, in essence making him the most enslaved person, to put it another way. So in a terrible bit of irony, while his devil fruit expelled pain from everything around him, he held on to every last bit of his own to spare the ones he loved. And speaking of the ones he loved, all he did for the detriment of himself was for the sake of one Bonney. But we do not take a turn for the better here, because for everything Kuma did in just the most tragic of circumstances, didn't give Bonney the freedom he wished for, but in two different ways that I will talk about, ended up imprisoning her also. So to repeat, the most caring, unwavering man, the greatest father in fiction, was forced into a situation where freedom was impossible for him and nigh on impossible for his daughter. So the first of those two ways that Bonney was imprisoned, and this is the more obvious, clear-cut one, that is the fact that the world government never intended to fully hold up their side of the agreement, and Bonney was lied to, misled, let down over and over because Kuma was pushed into a corner and, like a moth flying into a light, he was presented with a way out, not for himself, but for Bonney, which is obviously what he would have wanted, but that is not the way that things panned out. It does hurt saying all of this because it's like I'm discrediting or talking ill of Kuma and his actions, which obviously isn't true considering especially what's happening right now. But this is the true masterful writing of that backstory, because you have Kuma's whole childhood, his parents, all that happened with Ginny, and all he had to sacrifice for Bonney. That's the tragedy that anyone can see. You don't really need to do any digging for the sadness. But like I said, we do know things got better for Bonney given the chapter's post backstory, but before that, Kuma's actions, even if they were the right choices to make, aided in this tragedy. Like, he kept Bonney in the church, which was something he had to do, of course, but she was therefore imprisoned inside of it. And at worst, Bonnie's life was degraded to such a level as low as a bargaining chip, and she was also held hostage. And also, the second way Bonney wasn't given her freedom is that by leaving her, she was set on a locked path to chase after him. Again, restricting her. Yes, she did it by making her own choice out of her own free will, but Kuma did not intend for her to look for him and only look for him thereafter. This isn't the freedom he envisioned for her, and also Bonney is making her decisions based on someone else, based on Kuma. It was a restricted form of freedom, is what I'm trying to say. An oxymoron, not true absolute freedom. And that lasted for 2 years, where Bonney was driven solely to find and reunite with Kuma. And meanwhile, over in Wano, Joyboy has returned, and subsequently so has the freest person in the world, Nika, who fights as he wants, fights with a smile, and is laughing, bringing joy to the people, fighting with his imagination, meaning Luffy isn't powerful because of the fruit is powerful because of Luffy. His childlike wonder and nature means that his mind is not weighed down by reality, and better yet, he refuses to let his mind get weighed down by reality. And back to Bonney, who is aware of Nika thanks to Kuma. Her powers are a whole bunch of twists and turns on their own. Her powers and the extent of them was not known to us until very recently. We saw her aging herself as well as others up and down to toddlers and to pensioners. So the assumption was that's it, she could change people's ages, since that was all that was known at the time. The guess that it was called the age fruit was correct, but that's it really. Bonney can transform herself into any possible future version of herself that she can imagine. And she is only 12 years old. This devil fruit is at its most powerful in the hands of a child because their minds are filled with adventure, filled with dreams, and not bogged down by the weight of the world as compared to adults who are older and are aware of the harsh truth of the world. So they know that not anything is possible, and therefore reducing their possible futures by severely limiting their own perception of what they can and will do. So that sounds a lot like a certain freest man in the world, aka Monkey D. Luffy, and Bonney uses these powers to such an effect, wanting a Nika-ish future and throwing a giant punch like a Gear 3rd Luffy. And when her belief is fading, when reality was starting to take root and become real, she lost that ability, and finally Nika, Luffy, showed himself to Bonney, which reignited that wonder that she once had, giving validity to all her beliefs and all that Kuma, her father, had ever done in his life for her. So when we see in the final page a double page spread of chapter 1118 of Bonney in a form where she is completely free, mind you the wording, it's not a future where she is Nika, it's a future where she is completely free. After everything I've just spoken about, man, it feels good, it's fulfilling. And also the fact that she was given these powers by the same oppressors who were destroying her and her family. And it's these powers that are now giving her back control of her life that these same people were trying to take away. Meaning Saturn, in an attempt to remove freedom, gave even more freedom. So, when we summarize, Bonney's father was born into slavery, living a life of slavery, eventually welcomed slavery and succumbed to slavery in an effort to give her, his daughter, all the freedom in the world. But she was used as a bargaining chip, was kept hostage, and became a slave to her desire to get her father back. She lost her faith, lost her driving force, and just like her father, was pushed to the point where she felt that death was, to put it ironically again, the only way out, the only way to get that freedom, all the while looking upon the stories and legends of the freest person of them all in Nika. So when Bonney sees Luffy laughing, smiling, dancing, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the free flow of his movement, while he says that he's been here this whole time, obviously not just on Egghead, but with Bonney throughout her entire life. So when Bonney jumps up to become the most free she has ever been, this is the climax of a story arc spanning more than 16 years and over 600 chapters, where Bonney was introduced and now Bonney really is free. And finally, I feel like it's obvious, but also I think some people don't really get it, so I want to clarify this. My love for Luffy and Gear 5 and this latest Bonney development isn't because of how goofy and childish it is, that's a part of it, but it's a small part. Let's say I won't like another random goofy character like Gear 5 as much in another story because it's everything behind it that's making the true difference. All the story that makes it worth it. So going on the complete opposite end of the spectrum to the edginess of Bleach, Aizen, one of my favorite villains in anime. Imagine if Aizen started acting like how Luffy is acting, that would have been terrible. Bleach's edginess works really well in Bleach, and One Piece's goofiness works really well in One Piece. Because that childishness and goofiness is there because of its purity. It's the purest form of imagination and freedom. Its simplicity of having fun and doing what you want is what being truly free actually is. How laughter and smiles are at the core of happiness. These are simple lessons you learn as a kid, but that fade away and are forgotten or pushed to the side as you grow older. All the goofy faces and eye-popping we see. It does make me laugh and smile because that's the mechanism Oda chose to display freedom. So while the inspiration from old school cartoons is undeniably there, it's not copying or plagiarizing because that stylistic choice is merely the face of the culmination of One Piece's greatest themes. And to even bring power scaling into this, Gear 5 and power scaling do not go hand in hand. But here's the thing, with this, training is not the measure of strength here. The measure of strength here is how vast their imagination can be. Would I like to learn more about it and understand the intricacies and all the details behind it? Yes, 100%. But just seeing how this latest revelation fits and represents the themes of this story is already enough to make me happy.